Special Reports is a daily show that will cover issues surrounding the economic collapse. All our reports and daily alert news are backed up by source links. We work very hard to bring you the facts, and we research everything before presenting the report. Subscribe for latest on financial crisis, oil price, global economic collapse, dollar collapse, gold, silver, Bitcoin, global reset, new world order, economic collapse, economic news, political, geopolitical news. Today, we talk about global currency reset, the largest wealth transfer in history. Trump replaced the dollar with gold. The global currency reset is the absolute biggest transfer of wealth in the history of the planet. Another major transfer of wealth was during the Great Depression. Many people became wealthy while many lost everything. This global currency reset has been in the works for an indefinite amount of time. It is said that the linchpin for this is the reevaluation of the Iraqi dinar. However, many believe this reset has been hundreds of years in the making. What are the reasons for a global currency reset, and how will it be supported? The most obvious reason for a global currency reset is the huge imbalance throughout the world's economies. There are countries, such as Iraq and Vietnam, that have immense amounts of valuable natural resources, and yet their currencies are worth less than hundredths of a penny. This leads to the next reason for the global currency reset. Over the last couple of years, the entire world has slowly moved toward complying with new regulations, called Basel III. One of the highlights of these regulations is that all currencies the international banks deal with will have to be asset-backed. So, in other words, every country will have its currency valued in real time based on its resources. The resources considered in the valuation of a country's currency will be gold, silver, crude oil, natural gas, diamond mines, etc. One of the most common explanations of where the global currency reset comes from is the Saint Germain Trust. According to this legend, Saint Germain, during one of his incarnations, figured out the secrets of alchemy and was able to create precious metals and gemstones at will. He apparently amassed huge amounts of gold and gemstones that are hidden away somewhere, waiting to be released to the people of Earth. This story is very far-fetched, however. Wasn't the idea that the government was using us as collateral to borrow ridiculous amounts of money far-fetched as well? There are a couple of other programs one can study to learn more about the global currency reset. The number of people following NESARA has grown incredibly over the last 10 years. It all started just over 10 years ago, when a group of farmers got together and filed a class action lawsuit against the United States Department of Agriculture. NESARA law was the remedy to this lawsuit. However, it has yet to be enacted. There are many who believe that when NESARA law becomes effective, the entire United States corporation will be dismantled, along with all public offices that are currently being held by people with special titles, such as Esquire, if they're an attorney. NESARA law also says that all the people of America will be awarded some amount of money as a compensation for all the abuse done to the people by the United States federal government. The other program is the prosperity programs. There seems to be very little information available for this. But, it seems these prosperity programs will be funded by the Saint Germain Trust. These programs are supposedly going to be handing out very large amounts of money to each person on Earth and will change the face of the planet forever. Of course, all of this would happen after the playing field has been leveled out by the global currency reset. It is obvious that currency plays are very speculative, and there are no guarantees that any of this information will play out the way we think it will. And as much as we want to believe that there is a group out there somewhere fighting for the little people, and that they will eventually restore the republic our founding fathers intended, there is no denying that we each have to do our own part in this journey towards freedom. We each must do our own due diligence and figure out what's really going on in this world, and how does our economy and government really function. We have to figure out how we became entangled in this mess, so that we may eventually rise above it and be part of the solution. President Trump replaced the dollar with gold as the global currency to make America great again. Inside President Trump's otherwise standard Trump stump speech at CFAC was nestled what might be a most intriguing observation: global cooperation, dealing with other countries, getting along with other countries is good, it's very important. But there is no such thing as a global anthem, a global currency or a global flag. This is the United States of America that I'm representing. There's a keen insight in there that could, just maybe, transform our lives, America, and the world. No global currency? Was this with the poetic observation that there is no such thing as a global anthem or a global flag, just a trop? Or could it contain a political portent with potential high impact on world financial markets? Let's drill down. As it happens, there is a global currency. It's called the US dollar. Most international trade is priced in dollars. The Bretton Woods International Monetary System invested the dollar, which then was defined as and internationally was legally convertible to gold at $35/oz, with global currency status. France's then finance minister, later its president, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, called the reserve currency status of the dollar, its status, along with gold, as global currency an exorbitant privilege. By this d'Estaing was alluding to the fact, as summarized at Wikipedia, that, as American economist Barry N. Green summarized, it costs only a few cents for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing to produce a $100 bill, but other countries had to pony up $100 of actual goods in order to obtain one. That privilege, which made great sense during the period immediately after World War II, became a curse. In 1971, President Nixon, under the influence of his Svengali-like Treasury Secretary John Connally, suspended temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. That closure proved durable instead of temporary. The dollar became, and remains, the world's global currency. What had been an exorbitant privilege devolved into an exorbitant liability. As my former professional colleague John D. Mueller, of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, formerly Representative Jack Kemp's chief economist, writing in the Wall Street Journal in Trump's Real Trade Problem is Money recently and astutely observed, a monetary system based on a reserve currency is unsustainable, since foreign official dollar reserves, for example, are acquired and must be repaid in goods. In other words, the increase in official dollar reserves equals the net exports of the rest of the world, which means it must also equal U.S. international payments deficits, an unsustainable situation. In other words, if President Trump wishes to address America's merchandise trade deficit balance to perfection, of course, by a capital account surplus, he will find that allowing the dollar to be used as the global currency is the real snake in the economic woodpile. The dollar's burden as the international reserve currency, not currency manipulation by our trading partners or bad treaties, is the true villain in the ongoing melodrama of crummy job creation. Mueller's Wall Street Journal column enumerates the three options open to President Trump. First, muddle along under the current dollar standard, a position supported by resigned foreigners and some nostalgic Americans, among them Brian Riley and William Wilson at the Heritage Foundation, and James Pethokoukis at the American Enterprise Institute. Second, turn the International Monetary Fund into a world central bank issuing paper, for example, special drawing rights reserves as proposed in 1943 by Keynes, since the 1960s by Robert A. Mundell, and in 2009 by Zhu Xiaoquan, governor of the People's Bank of China. Drawbacks: this kind of standard is highly political and the allocation of special drawing rights essentially arbitrary, since the IMF produces no goods. Third, adopt a modernized international gold standard, as proposed in the 1960s by Roof and in 1984 by his protege Louis Seal Airman, and then Representative Jack Kemp. 2. Muddle along would, of course, be entirely antithetical to Trump's promise to make America great again. It would destroy his crucial commitment to get the economy growing at 3% plus, vastly faster than it has for the past 17 years, which also happens to be the recipe for robust job creation and upward income mobility for workers. It also is the essential ingredient for balancing the federal budget while rebuilding our infrastructure and military. To turn the IMF into a world central bank would, of course, be anathema to Trump's economic nationalism. To subordinate the dollar to the IMF's SDR would be equivalent to lowering Old Glory and replacing the American flag with the flag of the United Nations on every flagpole in America. Unthinkable under a Trump administration. That leaves the third option. 2. Adopt a modernized international gold standard, as proposed in the 1960s by Roof and in 1984 by his protege Louis Seal Airman, and then Representative Jack Kemp, whose eponymous foundation I advise. To this one should add, as Forbes.com contributor Nathan Lewis has shrewdly observed, the removal of tax and regulatory barriers to the use of gold as currency. As I have repeatedly observed, Donald Trump shows a strong affinity for gold. He has also shown a keen intuitive grasp of how the gold standard was crucial to having made America great. Donald Trump: "We used to have a very, very solid country because it was based on a gold standard," he told Mer Television in New Hampshire in March last year. But he said it would be tough to bring it back because we don't have the gold. Other places have the gold. Trump's comment to GQ: "Bringing back the gold standard would be very hard to do, but boy, would it be wonderful. We'd have a standard on which to base our money." Trump has been misled to believe that we don't have the gold. Other places have the gold. In fact, the United States, Germany, and the IMF together have about as much gold as the rest of the world combined, and America has well more than Germany and the IMF combined. This column has been updated to clarify that the United States has well more gold than Germany and the IMF combined, but not, as originally stated, more than twice as much. We have the gold. Bringing back the gold standard would not be very hard to do. Trump's politically unique intuition that we used to have a very, very solid country because it was based on a gold standard is no trivial matter. It is true. And as I have written elsewhere, Mark Levinson, writing recently in the Wall Street Journal, provides a very pessimistic view for the American dream, why the economy doesn't roar anymore. The long boom after World War II left Americans with unrealistic expectations, but there's no going back to that unusual golden age. People who had thought themselves condemned to be sharecroppers in the Alabama cotton belt or day laborers in the boot heel of Italy found opportunities they could never have imagined. The French called this period Les Trente Glorieuses, the 30 glorious years. Germans spoke of the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle, while the Japanese, more modestly, referred to the era of high economic growth. In the English-speaking countries, it has more commonly been called the Golden Age. The Golden Age was the first sustained period of economic growth in most countries since the 1920s. But it was built on far more than just pent-up demand and the stimulus of the post-war baby boom. Unprecedented productivity growth around the world made the Golden Age possible. In the 25 years that ended in 1973, the amount produced in an hour of work roughly doubled in the US and Canada, tripled in Europe, and quintupled in Japan. Ever since the Golden Age vanished amid the gasoline lines of 1973, political leaders in every wealthy country have insisted that the right policies will bring back those heady days. Voters who have been trained to expect that their leaders can deliver something more than ordinary are likely to find reality disappointing. Levinson, whose column uses Golden Age as its leitmotif, strangely fails to make the connection between, or even explore, the fact that the era he calls the Golden Age correlated precisely with America and the world being on a form of gold standard, particularly the modified gold standard known as the Bretton Woods system. Bretton Woods had the inherent flaw of using the dollar as an international reserve asset, but, until that flaw undermined it, it served equitable prosperity. What would be the outcome of Trump's following his instincts and going for the gold? Prosperity, that's what. Former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan just provided a barely noticed big reveal. In an interview with the World Gold Council's Gold Investor Chairman, Greenspan, stating, "I view gold as the primary global currency," went on to explicitly reveal, for the first time to my knowledge, that when I was chair of the Federal Reserve I used to testify before U.S. Congressman Ron Paul, who is a very strong advocate of gold. We had some interesting discussions. I told him that U.S. monetary policy tried to follow signals that a gold standard would have created. The period of following signals that a gold standard would have created, called the Great Moderation under President Clinton, was one of the most equitably prosperous in modern American history. That era saw the creation of over 20 million jobs. Robust growth converted the federal deficit into a surplus. It was, if only virtually rather than institutionally, a golden age. After the Fed abandoned its Great Moderation, America experienced almost no net job creation under President George W. Bush and very mediocre job creation under President Obama. Sad. I want the American dream back. We all do, very much, including President Trump. How might President Trump go about turning this around? He has a unique opening to forcefully pivot America toward epic prosperity. As Paul Martin Foss of the Menger Center astutely points out, the Federal Reserve Board currently has 3 vacancies. If Trump were to fill those vacancies with 3 sophisticated gold standard advocates from the short list of Louis E. Lehrman, whose eponymous institute I formerly served, Dr. Judy Shelton, who served as an advisor on his presidential economic transition team, former presidential candidate Steve Forbes, and John Allison, former CEO of BB&T, preferably as vice chairman for regulation. The president would create a super beachhead team at the Fed to seriously restore equitable prosperity. These appointments would be the safe and sure first steps out of economic stagnation for America. Couple these with a White House Team B to plan the enactment of the Jack Kemp Gold Standard Act and removal of the regulatory and tax barriers to using gold as currency. Then watch an American economic miracle take place. Mr. President, no such thing as a global currency? The dollar is the global currency. Want prosperity? Heed Chairman Greenspan and do not just view but restore gold as the primary global currency. President Trump, replace the dollar with gold as the global currency to make America great again. We have the gold. Thanks for watching.